having difficulties. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
What
good.
sort of difficulties are you having?
Everything kind of stopped at 15 seconds, and then I didn't know when we showed up. So welcome everybody to the Pop Culture SquadCast live. We are going to be having a special guest tonight. We are having Scott Koblish is going to join us in a few minutes. And hi, Mike. How are you? It's been a couple of weeks.
Has it really? I'm doing swell. It's the rest of the world, or the rest of my world, isn't doing as well as I am. So I'm beginning to feel a little like I'm taking advantage of something, but I'm doing fine.
Well, I'm glad you're doing well. I'm sorry that the rest of
I know you're under the weather.
I am. Thank you for noticing, and we're gonna push through because that's what we do. But yeah, I've been feeling sick, and I have to fly tomorrow, and I'm just hoping that I am fully recovered by next weekend, so we can have a good
I hope
time
so
in Chicago.
too. Well, I can see you get a particularly spicy Italian beef sandwich, and that'll drain you. And
that I look forward to that. Before we get to our guest, I want to talk about a couple of comic-y type things that I've been tossing around with some people lately, and one of them is comic logos. And as an editor and publisher, like, how much does a logo mean to a comic? For people who aren't in the industry and they just kind of pick it up and see that there's the name of the book on there,
right?
And how much thought goes into that?
I'm an old fart, so I think that the logo is absolutely critical. Now, less attention, I think, is being bestowed upon the logo these days, maybe for the last 15, 20 years, than previously, because there's no newsstand operation. So the assumption is that when somebody walks into a comic book store and they see the big gold wall of comics, that they will look at everything. Right. And they don't really need to have that logo grab their eye. Well, I still think that the cover is the most important sales tool you have.
Sure.
Somebody walking into the comic book store who has not seen that book before, there's probably 2 dozen interesting looking books that they've never really seen before or paid attention to before. And the logo helps suck your eye into that. So does a good cover illustration, and they have to work compatibly. Now, that has been de-emphasized over the past years. I have, even though I've done sketches of what I want a logo to look like on a brand new book, my sketches look like they've been drawn by chickens playing tic-tac-toe. Right. So we get somebody who knows what they're doing to actually do the final form. My go-to guy has always been John Workman. I think he's the best. There are many, many others who are very, very, very good. Interior lettering, John's great at that too. I worked a lot with Steve Haney, who is kind of retired from the comics scene. Mm-hmm. And
did a lot of lettering for you at first, right?
Oh yeah, and at DC. Mm-hmm. But when I left DC, they I don't know if they decided not to work with him, or because they had other guys they wanted to work with, or they he didn't want to work there anymore because he really didn't do any more lettering. But having a good letterer, a good logo designer, I think it's crucial if you want anybody to notice your book. So when Neil Adams changed the Superman logo back in the mid-70s, I was livid. And I still am, because that's the American flag.
So that's like that's kind of the thing. Like, there was times also when you were there, when you were at DC, not at the first time, there was a lot of changes, especially like the Batman logos. Like, were you able to see differences in cost changing on the logos and stuff like that, or sales?
Yes, actually, the only Batman logo I liked during my second tenure at DC was the one that I designed, of course.
Which
And I
was
designed it it was for the newspaper strip.
okay.
And our marketing people went nuts. They had to see it in a newspaper before they went nuts, which I think is amusing. But aside from that, they went crazy because they tell all of their licensors that the licensees that they couldn't have the Batman word pop out over the bat in the background, the bat shape in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did.
It couldn't go beyond the wings, is what you're saying.
Right.
Like the words
yes, it had to be contained.
Couldn't obscure
it had to be
the
contained.
wings. Interesting.
Right.
I think
so,
that's bullshit.
Yeah. I used probably a stronger word than that. And if you tracked my reputation, you'd understand that. But the funny thing is, we kept the strip going through like the first two movies, and it did fine. After a while, it was beginning to lose newspapers because they didn't like continuity strips and because the second movie was gone. But when we canceled it, they started to use it in their licensing, and they started to use it on the comic book covers.
That's crazy.
There have been more. Yeah, no, I'm sure they did that just to piss me off. But yeah, like that's what they lived for,
Sure.
There were more Batman logos than you could shake a stick at.
Yeah,
but not as many as there have been Detective Comics logos.
Right. I saw somebody a few years ago. I think when Detective got to 1,000, somebody put all the logos together and in one just giant image, and it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. Well,
were you also responsible for that one that was Detective Comics featuring Batman Family, right? That one.
Oh yeah. And that was a split-second decision. That's how we saved Detective Comics.
That's a story we're going to get to. I don't know if we'll get to that tonight, but that one's definitely got to.
Yeah, it's and it's easier to hear it from me than it is to carry Paul Levitz's history of DC, because it weighs.
Is it in there?
He does. I think so. Okay. It is in my copy, but that's because he wrote it in.
Excuse me. Can't do that to me tonight. I have my medicine here, so we're good.
You realize now that's the only thing I'm going to do. I'm going to try to break you up, try to get you. I understand.
So one of the things, that's
how I roll.
One of the things we're going to talk about, and we might get to this with Scott because it kind of affects Scott. Or something he worked on, was the reason I brought up logos. We had last night the Women in Comics, Women in History, Shade the Changing Girl reunion, which you can find on our YouTube page. And we were talking about, Shade the Changing Man had, when the second series that Milligan started, had a very generic-ish type of logo. And I don't mean to denigrate whoever created that. But
no, it fit in with the rest of that line, that subline.
But between 32 and 33, they changed it to where the words were inside of the giant shade. So it was this giant bubbly shade, and the words were inside of it. And then when they launched Shade the Changing Girl, they kept the same logo and just changed it to, instead of Shade the Changing Man, Shade the Changing Girl.
Which I think was the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And Shelley Bond was the editor of Shade the Changing Man when it canceled, and she was the first editor of Shade the Changing Girl and put that group together, and it was her decision to use that logo. But also there was a book that Scott worked on that was in the Flashpoint time frame. Where it was like 7 soldiers or 7 secrets or something like that, and it had Rack Shade in it, and he was like the main character of it. And so they used the same bubbling logo and just changed the wording, so it was like seven secrets or something like that, which I thought was very
Right.
cool because you knew where this is coming from, because if you were a fan of the Milligan Shade, you know that character
Right.
is going to show up here,
Right.
which
The
is important
logo
about
that
logoing.
the logo that is, I think, most commonly the logo shape that was most commonly thought of as shades was based upon Steve Ditko's original shade and his drawing of that, his drawing
Okay.
of the logo. I believe somebody, one of our letterers actually did the final version of it, but it was really very similar to Steve's. You should ask Jack C. Harris about this, because Jack was the editor. And I'm sure that the reason why they went for that was because nobody wanted to fight Ditko over it, because they were afraid he'd quit, which
Right.
was Steve's technique. It's like Steve did Steve's work.
Right.
And he wasn't an asshole about it, like Alex Toth, who was the greatest artist who ever walked the earth. So I use that word reservedly.
Sure.
But you didn't want to get into a fight because he would just walk away. And you didn't want to lose Steve Ditko. You can't really cover for Steve Ditko. You could with Spider-Man, which was a miracle. It's just, they still haven't quite done Doctor Strange right without him. But when he got sick and had to leave Hawk and Dove and the Creeper, you knew immediately. It's like, oh no, this is wrong. So you don't want to lose Ditko. So they just sort of did that shade, the changing main logo, just, and Steve didn't complain. So obviously he was happy.
Right. Exactly.
Great guy. I do not mean to make him, or Alex for that matter, sound petty.
No, that doesn't. People are people. They are. A lot of our great creators and writers and artists and whatever, they have egos, they have emotions, they have feelings about
Absolutely.
the things that they've done.
If they don't, there's something wrong with them.
Well, we're talking about Ditko. So his
black and white view of the world.
Well, his view of the work is the work, and that's what I'm here for. And he didn't take so much pride in from my understanding, it was that he didn't care for the adoration that went with the things that he created. He did the work because he did the work, and it was to pay the bill.
I think a big part of that was he was actually very shy.
Okay.
I respect his reasoning, and he says he lets his work speak for itself, and I think that that's fine. But I think in public, well, there was no Steve Ditko in public. I don't think I've ever been part of a conversation with him and more than maybe two or three other people. Now, they were very fascinating conversations, each and every one of them. I introduced him to Ross Andrew, and it was like a miracle. It was just a beautiful thing, because neither of them, they both got into the business at the same time, but they'd never met. This is like 30 years later.
That's crazy.
Maybe 20. But yeah, it was great. And but you never saw him, like, if there were like six people there, he wouldn't join in the conversation necessarily. So he's shy. That's fine. That's fine. It's not the cause of his political philosophy or his social philosophies.
So it didn't have to do with that.
Yeah. He just ported the objectivism over to his own work. I respect my art speaks for itself point of view. If you don't get really finicky about your work, who's going to? You're the artist. And by artist, I mean that in the most generic sense possible. You're the creator of this work,
right? And
you should care about it. And I mean, you don't have to be a jerk about it, but you should care.
Yeah, I understand. We had another topic that we were going to talk about, and I'm going to hold off on that one because I want to bring in our guest. But before we get to our guest, the very first live copy for the Pop Culture Squadcast is going to come at everybody right now. So pay attention. It's the nation's second longest running comic convention, Ithacon. It's happening on April 22nd and 23rd at the Emerson Suites on Ithaca College campus. Tickets are available at ithacon.org. You're going to be able to see DC Comics vets Mike Gold. I don't know where that guy is. Jamal Igle, former guest of the show, and Glenn Whitmore. Ahoy's Tom Pyre, Megaton Man's Don Simpson, which we had a great time with him last year, and J.C. Vaughn of the Overstreet Price Guide.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
The featured publisher Ahoy Comics will have a full crew of creators eager to meet everyone who shows up. Ithacon 46 will celebrate the 30th anniversary of DC's landmark Death of Superman event with writer Roger Stern and colorist Glenn Whitmore. There'll be cosplay contests, panels, kids' activities, and more. Plus, Ithacon is offering swag bags to all attendees who buy their tickets before April 16th. These overstuffed swag bags will offer over $20 worth of value in comics, books, and more. Join us, because Mike and I will be there. So Pop Culture Squad will be in the house on April 22nd and 23rd at Emerson Suites at Ithaca College campus. Tickets are just $20 for both days. Kids 7 to 17 are just $5, and kids 6 and under are free. Order your tickets now at ithacon.org.
You and I aren't the only PCS people who will be there.
Well, Ed Cato will be there as well.
That's right.
And
that's right. And Sherry's going to be there. Look at that. Yay.
And Mike and Mark wants his shameless plug. Mark, I'll give you a shameless plug. If you're at C2E2 next weekend, you can find, or you should find, the Unshaven Comics group in the small press area. They will be slinging comics all weekend long.
It's not a small press area. It's a small press area.
It's not a small press in an area. So small press and small press and small press in one big area.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're going to be there.
Exactly.
And they're going to have fun. And we're going to go say hi to them.
Oh, we're going to do more than say hi to Mark and the Unshaven Boys.
Mm-hmm. All right. As Mark has comments. All right. So let's bring in our guest. He's been waiting patiently in the green room. Scott Koblish is our guest tonight. He is an artist who has been penciling and inking comics for 30 years. I'm sure that's a number that makes him both proud and terrifies him. He began in an apprenticeship program at Marvel called Romita's Raiders. Did you ever hear about that?
Yep.
And he has inked hundreds of comics for Marvel and DC. He's penciled everyone's favorite Merc with a Mouth for 6 years. And in recent years, he's worked on some creator-owned stuff like The Many Deaths of Scott Koblish. You should, if you haven't read this book, you'll probably like it. The Secret History of the War on Weed. And his latest collaboration with Jerry Duggan, The Giant Kokju. I don't know if I'm saying that right. He's going to have to correct me, which comes out next month. So without further ado, it is an Image book coming out next month. All right, let's bring him in. Hello, welcome. You got to unmute yourself there, Scott.
Hello. Or sign what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. Lots of waving my hands around, which is that was an impression that people used to do of me. When I would come into the office, I'd be like, oh.
Waving.
You'd be amazed how many artists look like that when they walk into the office.
I always felt like, because you spend all your time alone drawing, so I always felt like I was shot out of a cannon, into the offices whenever I would appear. So like it was kind of nice to be able to kind of just see people. You feel like you've been let out of a cage. And,
that's right.
Unfortunately, you're doing all of that on your employers, but
it took freelancers a lot longer to realize this COVID thing was going down.
It did,
because freelancers don't leave anyway. You always got a deadline. You're always working. So it's like, what do you mean I can't go out of the house? I don't go out of the house.
Yeah. When did I go out of the house before? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking. I'm sorry, Scott. Go ahead.
No, now everybody else doesn't go out of the house. That's the only difference. So.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't like those people. We were just talking about logos. I don't know if you had heard. And you have this cover coming up, I think in a couple of, like, a month, maybe. Bob showed it very briefly a second ago.
Yeah, I was adding it in. You want me to add it in?
Please.
You want to talk about it first?
And I'll talk either way.
Now you cover, yes.
Now you see in the go back a little bit. You're zooming in. There you go. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see the sort of new Fantastic Four logo, and that logo pops in a scenario with 700 characters, because it's Fantastic Four 700,
right? Isn't it more than 700?
More than 700, yeah.
It's insane.
It's wonderful, and a nice tribute to George Perez, I should point out. But still, that's a good thing. That logo pops. That logo. You can see that logo even in the full shot. If you just had that one book with the logo on it, you'd certainly see that. That's what a logo is supposed to do. Yeah. Even in such a crowded scene like that. Now, of course, the coloring, it plays an important role. And if that logo was against a bunch of yellow costumed characters, then the logo itself wouldn't be yellow, because it wouldn't pop. It would just die. And you'd be surprised to see how many covers over the years do that. You can't really see the logo or what's special about the artwork, the cover art, because the coloring is too similar.
Yeah.
And it's a pain in the ass to do a cover like that, even though if you do it right, it's absolutely spectacular, because you don't want to have like a green guy standing next to a green guy, so on and so forth.
I worked pretty hard at making sure that everybody was that like a green guy was not next to a green guy next to a green. There's some places where I couldn't avoid it, but yeah.
Well, if you're going to have the Fantastic Four together, you're going to have a blue blotch there.
Yeah. As long as you put the thing in the middle of Reed and Sue, you should be okay.
Right. There you go.
I have like a million questions about this cover.
Yeah.
And first of all, how many artists have come up to you and said, like, why did you do this? Like, I mean, how long did it take?
This took about a month.
That wasn't my only question. Somebody else had the same question.
Oh, sorry. Did you have more question in that?
No, I'm saying somebody else asked the same thing.
Oh, yeah. It took about a month. The way that I did it is it was around the holidays. So in a strange way, it like, I had Christmas off and I had New Year's off. Do you know what I mean? Like things like that. So it wasn't 100% a month, but it took about a month. Oh wow, you found some great process.
Yeah, I took a bunch of your stuff off your Facebook page because the process is crazy.
That's really sweet.
Yeah, it took me about 3 days to do all the reference. So I had an iPad and I sort of went in to all 700 issues of the Fantastic Four. They have them online at the Marvel Unlimited app. And I just went in there and just scrolled through, taking screenshots of pretty much everybody. I had a good idea of like at least 150 that I wanted to have in there, but there's a whole.
How did you choose?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of ones in there that you just I had not seen before. So like I tried the ones. So I had a little bit of a mixed sort of result with it. Like I would sit there and I would go, well, I like Blastar, so Blastar is going to be up front, like
Yeah, right here.
and then
He's
I would
going right here.
yeah, and then I would run across like some characters. I needed some characters that were kind of a little lower to the ground. So guys like Pip the Troll or Herbie are a little further in front, just closer to the ground because they're small, So, and then you'd have like the middle range of people, and then you have like a number of people behind there. I had the flyers and the floaters. There's a whole bunch of characters that fly and float. So I knew that I wanted to put them way in the back there, and up top, so that like. And I also knew that I was going to have them all stand on Sandman, so I had a little bit of a leeway in that they were all kind of sort of standing on uneven ground. So that was kind of a part of it. I think there was a question about who I penciled first in there. I think I penciled in Ego with Living Planet first.
Interesting. Which is up here.
Upper left corner.
Yeah.
So that's funny, because what I was going to say is it's interesting because you kind of went bottom to top through your process.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I went top left and then bottom up.
Yeah, I moved it around.
They used to teach you to start in the upper left-hand corner, and I always thought that was kind of limiting for people. But if you don't know where to start, fine, start there.
Start in the top left corner, yeah. And then I think the first character that I inked was Bucky. Just because I wanted to ink Bucky. I was happy with the figure. So you start on what you're happiest with is usually what I start with. And then
like when you got here, this had to be like, how do you attack this?
Well, as you can see in the center there's like a mushy middle, and that mushy middle was a result of when I first did the layout. I had about 755 characters, and I kind of had to whittle it down to close to 700. Because it's the 700th issue. I wanted to have 700, but then at some point, like I decided that I was going to have the 4 members of the Fantastic Four, the original, the way they looked at the beginning on the far left-hand side of it, and then have what they look like currently on the far right-hand side. And I knew that made it 704 automatically. So I had a little bit of weasel room in the middle there. But I wound up, there was a couple characters I just didn't want to lose in there that I felt were kind of fun or held some promise. You can see like in the middle of that big hole there, the Mad Thinker's awesome android is in there.
Sure.
And then I just sort of built a lot of things around him. You can see these are the first.
These are the first things. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah.
Bucky and Cap and one of the Herbies and that's
Pip. It's over here.
Yeah, Pip is in there. So is Quasimodo, and that's Hades, the Marvel Hades. So
it's really amazing stuff.
You may want to think about telling people that your finished piece is actually the poster for the next Avengers movie.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to. I actually, the reason I even did this one is so I was at the Los Angeles convention in December, and
that's where we met. I don't know if you remember, but we did meet.
Oh, there. Okay, good. All right, great, absolutely, yeah. And some artist had come up to me, and he had just beaten my record at the I had a Guinness Book of World Records for doing a Deadpool wedding cover, which had like 232 characters on it. And he'd done like a G.I. Joe that had 313 and I was impressed because I know what it takes to do this. This is insane. So like I was like, congratulations. And then he was this is the one that I got the Guinness for, and he'd beaten it, and I was like, well, what was the number again? Like, and he was like 313, and I was like, all right. So if I do like 314, that'll take it, right? And he was like, kinda, like he was thrown off guard a little bit, and he was like, I'm not gonna try and you again, like, you know what I mean? But I was like, all right. I was like, the gauntlet is thrown. And,
But some newbie out there is going to look at your Fantastic Four 700 cover and
absolutely.
go, "I can do 800."
I don't think
Exactly.
so.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping. I mean, honestly, it takes a lot. So, like, it took me about a month. So, if someone wants to try and do this, like, I have one more thing in my back pocket that I know that Spider-Man 1000 is coming up in a few years. So, I have that one. I have that one in my back pocket. So, if you want to try and beat it at 800 or 900 or whatever, I have a possibility that I might be able to get to
That would
1,000.
work. That would work.
I'm going to need a little more space. Like, even doing that.
Go to eight pages.
Even that was tight. Yeah, because that was about 300. And
Bring back the Treasury editions. You know, the tabloid.
Yeah,
Do a wrap around there.
I'm going to need a bigger desk too. Yeah, because that's the original was 3.5 feet wide. So
yeah. So I have a question. And Cherry had a question too. Like, did you make? Are there copies of like the inked pages that people could? They should put that together as like a coloring book. For people to color the.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I mean, it's Marvel's. They can do something that they want. I mean, I have.
And as you did it, did you make a grid with it, like to give to Rochelle so she would know who's who?
Yeah, so I did a key. Yeah, like I told Rochelle like these are the characters on this section. I did a small version that had everybody numbered in red off of the black and white, and then I was just like this person, all the names, and I had of course all the screenshots that I'd taken, and they were all named. So I had a Google Drive that I gave Rochelle access to, and any characters that just didn't make a lot of sense or she hadn't seen before, like I was there to help. It's a tremendous amount of characters, and even there's a few in there that I'm a little like I would love to have a contest, like if somebody can name them all, but even I have about like there's 4 or 5 that I'm not 100% sure what their names are either, just because of whatever editor or whatever writer just missed putting that person's name in. Like there's one character that is a villain in the late 90s. They attack Ben and Reed, and Ben and Reed go, "Who are you?" And they go, "Wouldn't you like to know?" And that was my question. My question was like, I would like to know. I would like to know as well. And the name, I couldn't tell who it was. The character vanishes and then reappears later, but has a completely different color scheme, because I think the colorist wasn't keyed in on who the character was either, and they didn't have a helmet on at that point. I thought it was a boy, but it turns out that it was a girl. And so like it was just there's some comics that everyone's just trying to get out the door, and nobody's really in as much charge of the product as you would like. So I ran across a few of those, but for the most part, the Fantastic Four has just an incredible amount of characters that have come through it. Like even when I sat down and I said, "Can I find 700 characters in this?" I thought I'd have to pull, like Willie Loman is in there, but like, did you
put him in?
Find more like people like the mailman, and even though the mailman is in there, but at any rate, like I thought I'd have trouble, and indeed in some parts of some people's runs, they just want to do a Doctor Doom story. Do you know what I mean? They want to do their Galactus story. So I was kind of stuck at that, for a number of like 20 issues, 30 issues where there's no new characters introduced at all. But there are also runs like Chris Claremont's run where willy-nilly there's just characters jumping in and out, and I was so grateful for moments like that. Jonathan Hickman's run too, I was just like, great, oh thank you. So.
Scott, what did you do right after when you finished the piece?
It never felt fully like it was done, so like it kept like I would finish the physical piece and then I scanned it in, and then I would like just tootle around in it like trying to correct some things and fix some things and make sure that the little pencil dust, and that just took another day or two. Like it just never seemed to end.
Right.
So I still, to this day, I'm not 100% certain I'm even done with it. Like, there's days I wake up where I'm just like, football practice, like I'm just like, oh my God, do I have to figure out like, a few more characters? Like, so it never leaves you, something like that.
Well, that's an understandable, certainly understandable response, because you never really finish a piece like that.
Yeah, and even I had there was a couple characters that I just regret not having been able to put in there. So like Union Jack makes an appearance, and I love that costume. I think it's just beautiful, and he makes an appearance, and I wanted to have him in there, but he's only in there for one panel. So it was either him or like a villain that has a whole issue dedicated to him being a villain for the Fantastic Four, and I was like, well, I
Union
like
Jack.
Yeah, I like Union Jack, but I can't put him in there. So, and I tried to keep it up to date too. There's a character named Space Boy in there that just came out in October. So like, I tried to make sure that like some of those more recent characters are peppered in the middle there, because it could have easily been me just drawing the big ones, the ones that I like, the Blastars, the Annihilises, the Galactuses and stuff like that in the front, but I wanted to have like some ringers, like there was a character named Hyperstorm, fun costume. So, but nobody's ever thought about him ever again, but I put him up in the front row, so little things like that. Like
there are so many things. Like I think having the fully colored piece, like when the first thing that you published, I went looking at it and I remember it and I was like, oh man, like, and you had put certain people together and I'm like, oh, I'm glad you put those people next to each other. And
there's actually I'm sorry, there's a series of characters called there's two characters called the Seeker in the Fantastic. Then there's like three like robot characters that make an appearance on a page called the Seekers. So I put all those guys all together, So that's where you were going. I didn't mean to jump in.
No, that's fine. I loved it. But like, you obviously the Deadpool cover was, a big thing for you, but you also, and Mike kind of mentioned it earlier, you've worked with a lot of characters, for a lot of your career. Inking George tends to do that, right? And I want to say some of my favorite stuff that you did with George was the Legion of Three Worlds. Loved that story. Loved how beautiful that was. The two of you worked so well together on that. And you did a lot of the work on Brave and the Bold too when George was on that. Is that right?
I did. That's where I started. That's where I sort of picked up the thread. George, they needed somebody to help out with one of the issues, and then I jumped in, and then I was able to just ride with George for another, I think, almost a decade. We did stuff together. So, Legion of Three Worlds was one of my favorites. I honestly am a huge Legion of Superheroes fan.
I am wearing this because Gen Xers need to stick together. So.
Absolutely, yeah. I was just thinking about Alpha Flight the other day because someone was talking about having made a trip back and forth to their local comic shop, and mine was if I didn't take the bus home, I'd go into town and I'd get comics at the local store. Whenever they came out, and then I would walk home, and the walk home was 4 miles, about 3.5, 4 miles, and a good piece of it was along like a major road where the speed limit was 55 and there's no sidewalk. So, but I remember reading Alpha Flight 12 on that walk, what I mean? So I was like, I even remembered like what books I was reading, so. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Legion of Superheroes. My Legion of Superheroes is the bathing suit Legion. It's that period of time where in the 70s everybody was wearing some version of a bathing suit in that.
Right. The Mike Grell versions.
Yeah, the Mike Grell versions. Yeah, it was a little bit past the Cockrum changes, and
maybe we can get Mike to wear a bathing suit at what are we doing? Baltimore. He's going to be there for the Baltimore.
I hope he's
show.
coming to Baltimore with us, but I'll pass it. I'm going to see him in Charlotte, so I'll pass it by him.
Ask him if he can show up in a Cosmic Boys outfit. From that period of time, that little bustier.
Well, Jack Harris told me that the reason that Tyrok's costume is so horrible is because he hated Tyrok, hated the concept of Tyrok, hated everything about Tyrok, and so he gave him a horrible costume.
Tyrok was a tough. That seemed like.
Well, Jack apologized to me for him about a week or so. He's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't do enough to stop that."
But you can redeem any character, honestly. Like,
I thought you did a great job with it. I thought they did a great job with it in the Legion of Three Worlds. To be honest with you,
yeah, and I actually thought that they did a pretty good job with it. There's a period of time where he shows up towards the end of Giffin's 5-year jump.
So I'm a huge Legion fan as well.
Yeah, I thought that was use of him. Yeah.
The 5-year gap, the 5 years later is it's not necessarily my favorite Legion story, but is one of my favorite comic stories.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
There's I think the previous run, the volume 3 run, which is the beginning with the Legion of Supervillains and when Karate Kid dies, and if you Keith, so you know how he thinks about Karate Kid.
Yeah. Well, he hates Karate Kid.
Right. Yeah. So he has told me that if they ever ask him to do Legion of Superheroes, his one requirement is that he gets to kill Karate Kid.
Just to do like a hat trick with it, to kill him as many times as he can.
Absolutely.
You remember the movie TV show Karate Kid? DC got a check for every time they did that.
No way, really?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I believe that. 100%.
Oh yeah, and you talk to Paul Levitz about it, and Paul will tell you that there was no legal necessity for that. They just wanted to avoid any trouble. It was easier to write a check first.
Right. Absolutely.
We have a former president who should have. I digress.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, if you want to avoid a legal kind of thing. Although, I mean, does Marvel get a check for every time they use Ralph Macchio's name, or pointless joke?
No, I think that Ralph has.
I'm like, what? Where's this? He's doing comics now.
Ralph has to send them a check.
Oh, is that? Let's see. Oh, but anyway, yeah, actually that 5-year jump hit me at a really good time. I was in college, I think, and
you're a couple of years older than me.
Yeah, I had stopped reading comics, and because I had no money in college. So, but that one I just thought was fascinating because there was just they were focusing on a core group of characters. They were sort of building back the team, and you didn't know what happened. And that was the first time I'd run across that structure in a comic book where you had no idea what had occurred.
You knew it was bad, and you knew it was bad. You knew it hurt.
Yeah, you knew it hurt. You knew it was during Polar Boys being the team leader, so you knew that there was some incompetence in there involved. And then also you just sort of would find out from either text or a little quick flashback where everybody was. You didn't know where Dream Girl was at all. Do you know what I mean? Like these were just things where it was like my brain was on fire every time I picked up the issue. I would just like pour over it like 18 times to try and figure out what happened to everybody in that team. Some people just quit. Some people died. Like some people had horrible things happen to them. Like it was a fascinating way to handle it, and I don't think the property was the same ever again, but I loved it. I thought it was great. It was kind of like there was a lot of stories like that around at DC. Like I didn't like that Barbara Gordon was shot in the continuity. I kind of assumed it was an out of continuity story in that Killing Joke thing. But then when it was in continuity, I was like, well, I can't. There was just some things that like just misfire about like how that was handled, in the continuity then, because then you're just like, well, if it's a story that exists out of the continuity, I could see how that story exists. But when it was dropped into continuity, I was like, oh, I don't see how Batman's letting this happen. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah. So there was a couple things that would just sort of break a little bit of the soup for me, if I can mix my metaphors, that I didn't appreciate. But I guess after 80 years or however many years, these things, sometimes a mistake winds up being something that's just in the mix. You know what I mean? Like it's you take a longer view of some of these characters. Superman's up at 85 or something like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting
too.
No, it's fine. It's good. So a couple of things. One is that with the 5 years later run was kind of talking about is that there's this point, I think it's issue 7 or 8, where the whole Mon-El issue happens, right? And so what you've been going on for the first 6 or 7 issues is, okay, I'm trying to figure this out. And then everything gets reset and we're going to do it again.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
Yeah, that was a tough one for me to take too. Although I did like the
way that they pulled it through. They're like, there are consequences here. We're going to make stuff happen. And even if we have consequences again, we're going to have them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Like, I did like the fact that they used, who were they using? They were using, in that alternate world where Glorith is like trying to defeat Mordru, they use Feral Lad. Yeah, they pulled Feral Lad in, and I just thought that was great. They never mentioned that he's Feral Lad. It's just his name is like different.
Andrew Nolan.
Yeah, and I just thought it was just wonderful how they handled that. And I didn't mind. I didn't mind them not having Superman as the antecedent. I don't know why. I mean, I guess it's part of it, but it's easy to just go like, they have an affinity towards the Age of Heroes, and then just end it at that. Like, it doesn't always have to be Superman.
They apparently had a big problem with it, and that, and Mike has talked about this before, but like they had a big problem with once they did Crisis. And messed it up, and that there was no more Superboy, that they couldn't get their heads around how could we have a Legion of Superheroes without Superboy.
Yeah, how's he going to meet Supergirl?
Yeah, I just felt like, I don't know. I didn't need to know that. Like, as a reader, I was like, I don't really need that one. But
we just move on.
I can see where every editorial meeting ends in chaos. But but I didn't need it as a reader. So.
But also, our editorial meetings started in chaos.
Oh, that makes sense.
And I know you kind of mentioned to me earlier when we were talking that you haven't met Mike, but Mike was the editor on Suicide Squad. So, you were not. You were too.
No, I was not. My assistant was the editor.
Right.
I launched Suicide Squad in Legends, but that's Bobby Greenberger's, who hates being called Bobby. But is a good guy anyway.
Are you allowed to call him that?
I'm sorry?
Are you allowed to call him that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
So Bob Greenberger was the editor, but you were his boss.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
And that's where Barbara Gordon got her groove back. So
well, I'm with Scott here on that. I think that Killing Joke is one of the most magnificently drawn comics ever, and largely one of the best written. Big fan of Alan's. Yeah. Bigger fan of Brian's, only because I know Brian much better. Remarkably gifted, but it was wrong. And a few of the people who are involved in that, and I won't mention who, have come to feel that way. for some time, I should point out. Either it was wrong to do, maybe yes, maybe no. If it was out of continuity, it would have been fine. Or at the end of the story, where Batman and the Joker are having this great laugh on top of the building, Batman would just go ding.
Yeah.
Let the next guy bring him back.
Yeah.
Your argument was, how could Batman let that happen? It's the same argument that when Jason Todd came back to life, asked him, how did you let that happen? How did you let him kill me and not kill him? Why is he still alive?
Right.
Yeah.
I guess I understand that. I don't know. I guess you have to have been there to get that attitude. I haven't. I have come back from the dead, actually. So
you were there when that happened, the 900 number, right? You were on staff then.
When what happened?
When Jason died.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was another decision made at one of those editorial meetings. We used to have, I suspect they don't anymore, these like 3-day meetings. We'd all
have them.
Do they still 3-day and they go away? They go to someplace far removed from reality.
They do.
And act like they're.
I've heard about them
in business. Oh, they were horrible. Nothing got accomplished, and everybody was sort of doing projects to pitch at those meetings so that they would look good, because we were stuck. We had to be there anyway. So a lot of bad ideas came out. I also got the fastest approval I ever got in my life over at DC Comics while I was at one of those editorial retreats. It took 18 hours to get the approval for a project. And then after a year and a half of waiting for the contract, I walked into Bob Greenberger's office. By this point, he was now in administration. And I very politely asked Bob, who do I have to blow to get this contract? And Bob was kind of offended by that.
I was like, you're in luck.
Yeah, really. Exactly. He's like, no, not you, Bob. I just want the contract.
Right.
The project never happened. And the creator, who I will not mention on air, got a very healthy kill fee.
Interesting.
For waiting for a year and a half for a project that got approved in 18 hours to not happen.
Yeah. I guess that happens more often than not. Well, I don't know. The good thing about comics is that things that you would never thought would be possible happen. And that the flip side of that is stuff that you think would happen doesn't happen. So,
right.
It's the baffling part of publishing, I guess.
Well, that's why I always enjoyed it when somebody would bring in like a guy with a business degree to consult.
Yeah.
And this was true at DC. This is true now at First Comics. I mean, all kinds of places. We don't speak English in comics. Yeah. At best, we talk backwards. Every rule that makes comics work is against traditional business practice. Every one. Spider-Man was published in the last issue of an already canceled book. Uh-huh. Stan shoved it in there because he really liked it. Martin Goodman, the publisher, did not, but he didn't care. It was the last issue, and they were burning inventory. He liked that idea. And then it became the company. I mean, it literally became the company. The Hulk, 6 issues. Stan didn't let it go. Brought it into Fantastic Four. Brought him back to his own series. Made it a TV show out of him. Yeah. I can go on and on.
Yeah, it's true. There's a Billy Bragg album called Talking Poetry with the Taxman.
Right.
It's kind of what we wind up doing, is that there's a natural because when you're creating things that didn't exist, it's hard to describe to people what it's going to be, and it doesn't even wind up being the thing that it's going to be within the first 6 issues. Oftentimes, like you said, the Hulk. I remember the Hulk was flying. He would only change at night. You know what I mean? Like, and
Right.
that's not what everybody thinks about the Hulk at all, because that's not what he is now. You know, but it takes a while to sort of boil it down and figure out what's unique about that idea and what that idea actually has at its core to build on. So that's hard to describe to a guy with a business degree who's used to widgets, because someone comes in and says, well, I have a widget and it fulfills this function within a car, and we can put it as an intermittent window wiper thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, they have some place for it, they have some patent for it, they have some way of figuring it out. But that's not how comic books work at all, you know.
No, we don't work at all. It's cockroach capitalism at its best, and that does not ever follow the rules. You can't explain Jim Warren to somebody. You know, what's his business model? My response was, business model? His business model was to not go out of business. That was the model. When I was with Classics Illustrated, we had this thing. I don't want to get into the details, but this consultant came in to inventory this huge warehouse of old comics and develop a barcode system for selling old comics. I wasn't directly part of this part of the project, but nonetheless, he came in, and I'm trying to explain to him, and my buddy Mike Robb was trying to explain to him, how comics is backwards. It's different. It's a different language. And he says, nah, it's all the same. And I said, no, it's really not. He said, no, it's just like greeting cards. And I go, no, you have different greeting cards. We have 7 different books called Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Being published right now. And I don't even want to tell you about Richie Rich. Your head will explode. And he says, nah, it's all the same. It's all the same. I swear to you, this is true. And I don't mean this as a joke, but I'll cop to it. 4 days later, he died of a heart attack.
No.
Oh my gosh.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
That's number 2.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, yeah, I can see where that might happen. Yeah.
I felt so bad for the guy before he died. Obviously when he died, it just became a whole different thing. But my God, you do not have a good week ahead of you. Well, it turns out he didn't have a good week ahead of him.
Well, publishing is certainly not for the faint of heart at all. Yeah, so it's a very difficult field to be in, because you're right. It's something that seems surefire. For whatever reason, sometimes it's the people on it, sometimes it's the concept itself. You just never know that it's going to be. That's Dean. Dean is so sweet.
Dino, hey Dino.
I have not really.
That's so sweet.
Walter. I should meet Walter. Maybe we'll.
You will meet him.
Yeah.
Because he's going to be at the Morristown show.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Yeah, Morristown is my old stomping grounds.
Right. I'm from Randolph, so we talked about that, right?
So that's what we were bonding about last time. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when you were when I was there, I would go to Rockaway Sales to get my comics from there, and
interesting.
It was a walk for me.
There was a small shop. It was actually my first job when I was 12 years old, going on to 13. There was a small shop right next to Heroes World, but when Heroes World opened, that was pretty much it for this small shop. And it was mostly old used books, science fiction books, dusty old magazines, and comic books. And I helped that guy move all of his stuff, all of his product out.
And when he left?
Like basement or something like that, when he closed it up. That was
crazy.
The first job I had. And weirdly, the IRS has it as my first job, because I guess he was smart. He paid taxes.
I thought your first job was in the framing store.
No, that was a job that I had in college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There was a framing store in Morristown too.
That brings us back to Jack C. Harris, because he used to work in a framing store.
Yeah. Also, I'm sorry, I forget who was there. There's somebody else that we were talking about in Los Angeles who also worked in a framing store.
Every customer that ever comes into a framing store has the same experience. They go, I paid this much for this painting or picture or whatever it is, and now I'm going to pay 4 times as much to frame it. And they can't wrap their heads around it, but that's exactly what happens.
Been there, said that. Yeah. I don't know if Dean is still with us, but I will affirm that Walter and Wheezy are 2 of the nicest people ever to walk the earth. However, I was with Wheezy once in the 1970s when we had this big, like, Marvel versus DC volleyball thing going on. And Walter...
hold on, I'm going to interrupt. There are 2 stories about Walter Simonson not being the nicest man in the world. This is one of them. And when another time I'll tell you, Dean has the other.
Okay. Walter was sort of the captain of one of the 2 teams, and Al Milgram, who is also one of the nicest guys,
super sweet,
ever to walk the earth. Really, and they're all really gifted, but you can see that from their work. And it was so volatile. This game was so volatile that the 2 of them actually got into a fight. I don't mean like, you mudda. No, I mean fight. And Wheezy and I were sitting down on the ground, and we look at each other and we go, because neither of us were really great at volleyball. We went like, gee, I think that this has pretty much run its course. What do you think? Because, Walter and Alan fighting one another over anything, that's a sign of the apocalypse.
Yeah, they're super sweet. I've met Al a couple times. Really nice guy, wonderful. And I had all sorts of questions about Firestorm for him, because Firestorm was one of my favorite characters growing up. Just the design I really liked it a lot.
You have to thank me for that.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, thank you.
Let me explain. Now, Alan
I did not know this. All right, this is news for
me. Alan is probably confused if he's listening. I was doing a house ad for Firestorm.
Okay.
So I give him, for the first issue, like 2-3 weeks notice. We're going to need the cover for the house ad, or at least, a really nice design, a pencil and ink sort of costume thing that will say Firestorm on it. And as we get closer and closer, I start harassing Alan all the more, because I had been an editor already by that point in time. And finally, 2 or 3 days after I absolutely needed it, the dead in the word deadline, I finally get him to draw it. And it was magnificent. If you have books from around that era, dig it out. That his drawing was just brilliant. And it took him all that time to not do the work in order to come up with that brilliance, which happens a lot.
It happens too often. Yeah.
And it's the only reason why I'm taking any sort of credit, because I was the fire under his ass.
That's
literally.
Al had said that because the big sleeves were something that I always liked, and he said that he needed something because it wasn't going to have a cape for some reason. So he was like, he needed something to show that when the character was flying, like some sort of direction. You know what I mean? So
I thought the hair would do that.
I think the flaming hair would do it as well, but I guess there's a gilding the lily aspect to it. Yeah.
Well, it's sort of like Hawkmen. You can't really fit them into all of them into every panel.
Yeah.
So you want to have other stuff to back up into when you need to.
Yeah. Hawkman in an elevator is just a terrifying concept. Yeah.
No, being next to Hawkman in an elevator is a terrifying concept.
It wouldn't work out very well. But I just want to thank Dean. You're incredibly sweet and incredibly kind to say so. So Thank you. And I'll meet Walt, God willing, this year. So properly.
I want to switch gears a little bit because let's get you on and talk about something new. You have a new book coming out next month with Jerry Duggan,
Yes.
who you've worked with on a bunch of stuff, right? You guys are frequent collaborators, and so we'll put it into here. So this is the cover to the. You got to pronounce it because I'm not sure if it's a long O, like you in the long O, short O's. I'm not sure. What is the name of this book?
It's kind of like kaiju. So like it's so we had it as kakshu. Right, like kakshu kind of thing. That was what I was thinking. Okay. So, yeah, it's
that's good.
Big monster book. It is. It's kind of, Jerry. When we worked on Deadpool, there's an element of scatological humor. No, it's not called kakshu. It's kakshu. Like I mean, or however kaiju is pronounced. I mean, I don't really know.
Dean lives in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Listen,
but it's however kaiju is pronounced. You know what I mean? Like that's it, because that's the suffix at the end of that we've borrowed for it. But it is a scatological masterpiece. Basically,
so I will grant you that because I read it. And my words, they came out of my mouth were holy shit. So it is ballsy. Let's put it that way.
It is, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Go
ahead. Do not apologize for this book. Do not apologize for this book.
No, I mentioned this to Bob during the green room stuff, but there's a page there that really looks like you're doing either a tribute or a send-up of Eric Larson, and it's a wonderful page.
Oh,
it is the page he's talking about. The page.
Yeah.
Which page is the page?
It's the ballsy page.
Oh, the ballsy page. Yeah. I wasn't thinking of Eric in that moment, but I was trying to think of some way to make it exciting. Do you know what I mean? Like Jerry and I talked about the concept, and I was curious because I had not heard anybody ever really come across with this concept before, and I thought, well, if we do it, we're the only ones who are going to be able to do it. And then I thought about it more, and then I was like, well, how am I going to do this? Because I can either hide the goods because basically the story.
I don't want to spoil any of this.
Yeah, exactly.
We want people to go and get this book. And we can talk about it. 18, we can talk about it, but we can't tell you what is actually happening.
Yes, exactly. Well, I didn't want to good, so to speak. So, like, I did want to make sure that if I was going to draw something that was as crazy as this book, that I leaned into it. Because there's only two things you can do with a crazy concept like this. You can kind of skirt around it, or you can embrace it. So, embracing it was my job. And we did the best we could with it, and I had a blast doing it. And the colors are fantastic.
Absolutely!
I just thought they nailed everything. They came up with a whole bunch of color schemes that.
Is it hi-fi? Is that right?
Yeah, hi-fi. Yeah,
and
Brian Miller and Kirsty Miller just nailed it. Like, just did such a great job that really sold it even better for me. So. It's a 3-issue miniseries that comes out in April and then May and June. The May issue coincides with when the 700 Fantastic Four issue comes out. It's the same day, so I'm probably going to do a signing somewhere about that. But yeah, it's a really ballsy concept, so to speak, and it was a blast to do, and we're just going to see what happens with it. The years where I looked at something and said, "Oh, that's a concept that won't fly," are gone. I don't really know what works. There's a movie about Basquiat, the painter, and in the movie, the character Basquiat he's with Andy Warhol, who's in that movie is being played by David Bowie, and Andy Warhol is looking at a painting that he's got, and he doesn't really know how to plus it or to make it better. And Basquiat just sort of goes up and scrawls some just garbage on the side of it, and then the Andy Warhol character goes, I don't really know what art is anymore, and that's kind
Is that
of,
how you feel?
yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I had you, because what happens is that when you're starting out, you're influenced by the people who wrote the things and drew the things that you love, right? So you have some general idea of what's good, because you're sort of like sitting there and you'll, in my case, I sit there and I go like, well, the John Byrne, Chris Claremont X-Men, like that's like a peak for me, or Watchmen or something like that. That's like a peak of like human activity in this field. And then what happens is that there's another 30 years that piles on top of it, and then it becomes hard to sort of say, like, if I follow those threads, am I in part of the conversation with the rest of comics? Because like, or am I just sort of like isolating myself in relationship to all the things that are in the current culture? Because like, I love the X-Men, but the book that has the most X-Men-ish feeling to me is My Hero Academia, whereas the artwork is not the same, but the sort of general idea of kids all in a school with powers that are confounding and confusing, and having like supervillains and stuff like that, like where they have to face off and grow as into adults. Like that's where that's happening in that book, but it's not really happening in the X-Men book. Do you know what I mean? So like, sitting there and thinking about what my next move is as an artist, you have to kind of sort of sit there and say like, well, you might have to go sideways in order to make it feel like you're making some progress in one way, and then sort of go like zigzagging in order to figure out where things are going to go next. Does that make any sense? It might not. The look of Batman
Absolutely.
is really
it absolutely makes sense. Art is not for the artist to determine. It's for somebody else later on. You, not you in particular, but an artist should work from the heart. And if you can make a living at that, oh man, you're one of the most fortunate people on the planet.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of what my thought process is. And also I've had a number of experiences when I've gotten onto a project. If I had a project that I was really looking forward to since I was like a little boy, like oftentimes that project, there's something about it. As an example, every time I draw Captain America, it just doesn't look 100% right to me, because I have in my concept, in my mind, there's a Captain America that's in here, and I've never been able to really get him to be out there.
Scott, I don't know if you can hear us, but you're steadily, your feed's steadily getting worse. So, and you've kind of stopped. So I don't know if you've dropped out or not.
Oh my gosh. Am I the only person still alive? Am I the last man on Earth?
You're
You're
the one.
No,
you're the one.
Charlton Heston is behind you. You're okay.
Yeah, I'll be all right. We're all there. Right? It's actually here.
I'm gonna drop you out for a sec,
okay.
and maybe if you want to
disconnect
and reconnect.
The internet is basically what happened. Yeah. So
why don't you pop out and come back in? I'm gonna drop you out.
Oh, wow!
I felt
got rid of him.
No, we want him back. There's more to talk about. But oh my gosh, like you read the book. I read the book. I'm excited for this. I'm excited. They did a good job of creating. They did the thing and you need to do in a first issue where, okay, I want to read issue 2, right? I want to see they blew your socks off, and then at the end of it, you're like, oh, yeah, I want to know what's going to happen next. You know, that's the thing you have to do in an issue 1.
When Wally Wood created Wits End, and Wally
Mhm.
Wood's Wits End was wonderful. He got all these pros to do what they always wanted to do. I mean, they weren't doing it for the money. They were doing it, because Woody was publishing this thing. And he said, "Do you want to do the story you've always wanted to do, whatever that is?" And got some really good stuff there. That first issue was just phenomenal. But the person who really got it off his chest, who did something that he could not possibly have done for the publishers of that period, was Steve Ditko and Mr. A.
Okay.
And I was about 18 or something, and the end of the story, I'm not ruining it for you. The end of the story, Mr. A lets the bad guy drop off the building to his death because he didn't want to risk injuring himself. He said, "Why should I risk injury for a guy like you?" And I walked away from that thinking, God, that's the most human thing I've seen in comics in my life. You got to have those stories. They may not be commercial, but nobody knows what's commercial. They may not be art, but nobody knows what art is.
Right.
Is it a good story? We know that. And this was a good story.
I agree. And let's see if we can see if Scott can hear us. He's
Ooh,
back.
Look at that.
A little bit. I'm not sure how well he's back. We're still a little off. Can you hear us? He's not moving in our agreement. I'm going to pull him back out a second.
There was like a tornado in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's something. Night. It's definitely a Los Angeles thing, I think. I'm still, for anybody who's coming late, we did spend some time talking about the 700 characters on the Fantastic Four piece, and go back and check that out because I know some people have come in recently.
If Scott doesn't do anything else in comics, or he does everything else in comics, that's the piece he's going to be remembered for, because you're just going to look at that and go, "Holy crap!"
You are.
Hey!
Can you hear us?
I think. I don't know
that's a lot better.
The
that's
gods
okay.
of the internet were like, and, like, enough of you.
All right, you're good.
I'm back.
Well, let's try that.
Hey.
I want to talk, and I hope you can talk about this. You're hanging a little bit, but we're going to continue to power through this. One of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about, and I kind of brought Mike up to speed. Can you hear me, Scott?
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
He just put a card up there.
Right. You're coughing.
I think we're still okay. I can hear people.
Why don't you turn your camera off for a minute and we can just listen to you for a sec, just see how that works?
Stop cam. Can you hear me okay now? Or?
I can hear you good. I mean, maybe it might be better for now for that. Yeah. Let's do that, because I want to.
Equivalent of putting a bag over my head in order to.
Unfortunately.
That's good. I think it's probably better for everybody else. Yeah.
Well, at least you'll be able to hear us and we can hear you. I want to talk about this book a little bit. And I just kind of found out about it last week. I did a Women in History panel with a bunch of editors, and one of them was Heather Antos.
Oh, yes. Love Heather.
And so we were talking actually with Diana Schutz about her work as a translator that she does a lot lately. She's been doing a lot of work translating. And so this book, from my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that someone found out that Deadpool translated into Spanish is Massacre.
Mm-hmm.
So a character was created called Massacre, and this book was written originally in Spanish, and then Google translated into English, because that's basically what was happening with the translations into Spanish, and they were not going so great. So it was kind of an this is how the Americans, stick it to the English speakers, because this is what the Spanish speakers have been getting. No, that's what I heard. Scott, you there?
He's gone.
Oh, he's gone again.
God, I hope it's not an
I think I
earthquake.
still may be on. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not 100% sure. So
I can hear you. I heard
can't
that.
tell. Boy.
I don't think he can hear us. I think that's the problem.
So that the book
No.
that you have up on the screen now, that was translated into English and published.
Yes.
I
It
don't
was
know
published. It was
I don't
published
think
with the
I'd read
Google
it.
Translate. Oh, I didn't read it. I'm not.
I got to check it out.
It's not.
It out.
Heather was excited because she was listed as deputy editor.
Deputy
Or editor deputy or something like that, because that's the way that it translated how it's pronounced in Spanish, how that is written in Spanish into English.
So is there a marshal editor?
I'm not sure. Hey Scott, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. I think we're still going. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great right now.
I can hear you.
Right, okay, good. All right. So I think that the question was just about like this particular book and how it started in Spanish and then they translated it into English. But the funniest thing about that translation, and I'm sure you just covered it a minute ago, was that it was a translation that, like, so things that would be like Spanish, like oye, like just translated as here, HEAR. Like, so like. But when I signed at a shop for that book, and someone picked up the book and they left, and then they came back I would say about an hour later, and they were like, "Oh, I think I picked up the wrong version of this. This is all in Spanish." And I was like, "Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what this book is." So. And then people clamored for an English version of it, so. We did that. It was such a blast to do. That was the joy of Deadpool, is that everything that when we would do it, I was sure that we were breaking it, like that it wouldn't work as soon as we were done with it. Everyone would go, "Oh, well, I used to like Deadpool and now I don't." But like every time we did something crazy with it, like it just got more and more people liked it, and we were conscious of what we were doing. We weren't trying to like ruin anything, and we had a plan in general for like where we wanted to take the character and stuff like that. But yeah, you just couldn't break Deadpool. Stuff like turning to the audience and then talking to the audience, that's not going to work in a Superman comic once he starts doing that. That kind of breaks the character. It causes trouble with that concept, or Spider-Man doing that, So, but with Deadpool, once you've got that built into the actual monster, then it just becomes kind of you can take the brakes off of anything. We put an afro wig on him, and people loved it. We put him in. I put him in a costume that was like a Kirby kind of costume, and I had him fight Kirby monsters and villains and a cosmic baby, and I destroyed the moon, like that kind of stuff. Like I destroyed the moon, by the way. I don't think that was in the original plot. Like I destroyed the moon because I had a joke in my head. The Watcher was in this book, and I was always wondering why the Watcher was always interfering. And this is a story that was ostensibly set in the early 60s. And Deadpool winds up accidentally destroying the moon. And I wanted, just because I had one panel where the Watcher like looks up and yells, "My house!" Because I wanted that. You know what I mean? Like I desperately wanted.
That's why you did it, right?
And that's legitimate.
And
It's
he's like,
totally legitimate.
Yeah. So as
Uh,
soon as his house was destroyed, he knew he had to get more involved, and that's the joke that I wanted to just throw in.
So destroy the moon so you can write a joke, right?
But that was the kind of stuff that was fun about Deadpool. So
why not? Why not?
yeah, absolutely.
It's not like Crisis, where absolutely everything is different for about a week, and then they reboot everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, that stuff is super fun. What else did Heather say about it? Because I haven't seen Heather in like a year or two, and she's fantastic.
We were talking. I don't know if you missed the part. We were talking about. We were talking with Diana Schutz about her translating. She's translating Black Sad, and a bunch of other French into English. And I'm not sure, I think that's the way she's going with it. But then she kind of talked about how important translation is. One of the things I mentioned is there's a book that I read. I guess time has no meaning anymore, but I think it was a couple of years ago now. And there's this comic that I really wanted to love, and it is just beautiful, like some of the most beautiful comic art in a comic book that you'll see. But I couldn't read the book. I ended up getting it and just flashing through it because two things. One, there was a terrible font choice in the lettering that made it unreadable. But even when she tried to do that, you could tell that it had been translated from another language, and I sort of have a familiarity with the language it was translated from, so I could tell where they made those choices, and it didn't feel like it had been translated like into an English speaking version.
Yeah,
well, that's the problem with Americans. We pretty much only speak American.
True.
We don't grow up like in Europe where there's a different language every 6 miles.
Sure.
So our thought process is very nationalistic.
It's true. I was in Italy for a convention, and I had done a few conventions here and there in Europe. So I'd go to Germany. Everyone was really happy to try their English out on me. The same in Holland and Amsterdam. But when I was in Italy, nobody wanted to speak English to me whatsoever, it took me a little while to get used to the fact that I couldn't communicate at all with anybody there. The only way I was able to figure a little bit of it out is to think that it was Spanish, because I know a little Spanish, but with an Italian accent.
So Spanish with an Italian accent got you by?
Kind of get a little bit of the vibe, but nobody wanted to speak it, and I felt really isolated. It was fascinating because one of the advantages of Empire, I guess, is that we wherever we do go, there is usually one person speaking English to us. But in Italy they didn't want anything to do with me. But it's a good thing I draw, you know what I mean? So I can draw things, basically.
Right.
So draw Spider-Man.
Look, there are artists and writers and humans who just rarely speak.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know, you see them in conventions all the time, and it's fine. I mean, I've gone deaf, so I don't care anymore. But back when I could hear people, it's like they're not saying anything. So at least in Italy, they're upfront about it.
Yeah. There you go. Absolutely. I mean, they dragged me on stage knowing that I only spoke English too, and then they couldn't. I just had to say "Je suis American." Like I did. I had no concept. Everyone was stuck on stage. They were like, "Do you know French?" And I was like, "Not really." They were like, "Do you know German?" Not really. And it just rolled from there. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting concept. Like even in comics though, it makes a difference. I remember I'm a huge fan of young all-stars, which nobody is, but but Roy Thomas's Young All Stars, like the concept of the villains there, where they used, you know, German names for the villains, and the concept of Grosshund Uhl and Der Fledermaus as the villains. The fact that that it was the Bat was Robin, you know, the Robin version of it, and like the Teutonic Justice League that he created. I thought that was fantastic.
That's awesome. Roy Thomas,
I think.
Yeah, sorry, he's fantastic. Anyway, go ahead.
I think Roy Thomas had the trademark on Adolf Hitler. So
that's three.
We used Adolf Hitler in the Deadpool issue. Actually, I had so much fun drawing that guy because I decided that I was just going to draw him like a maniac, like, you know, that he was just some hyperactive maniac, and even Jerry and Brian came up with what I thought was a pretty great concept for Hitler, and you just can't pitch it as a movie, but we did it as a initial couple pages. Is that people have been trying to kill him all of his life, like he just doesn't. You know, he hasn't died. You know, because you got to keep the timeline straight. But time travelers have been trying to kill him his whole life. So by the time that this one time traveler tries to get him, he's already prepared. You know what I mean? Like he's been prepared by an entire life of people trying to like sandbag him throughout his entire life, that he manages to like beat up the time traveler and take his time travel device. You know what I mean? So like, I just thought that was a clever idea. That like, I even had an idea where it would be great if you had people, you know, in like a timeline kind of cleaning up kind of capacity, like the TVA, or just some group of people from the future who were dedicated to trying to make sure that the timeline was pure, and you know, you follow like a new character on the team, and it just turns out that like the entire time they're just trying to save Hitler. You know, that might be like a really fun concept. Although, yeah, like at the end of the issue, he finds out that he's part of a team of people that are supposed to save Hitler. So it's just then
it turns right.
Yeah, exactly. Then you would have to figure it out. You know? So.
There was this brilliant story. It may actually be my all-time favorite single comic book story, and it only runs like 4 or 5 pages. It was done for 2000 AD, written by Alan Moore, drawn by Dave Gibbons, I think it's called Chrono Cops. And it is a time travel story that is a parody of a parody. And people say you can't do a parody of a parody. Well, yes, you can. They did it perfectly. It was this massive time travel story where they keep on going back to this one nexus point in time, and they reveal more stuff about it. And you go back in the story and you see, yeah, it was there the first time. You just didn't see it because you had no idea to look for it. And it was as close to perfect as I've ever read. And I don't think there's anything harder to do than a well-constructed time travel story. It happens a lot more than one would think could happen. But boy, this was perfect. This was perfect.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I'll look for it. I'm a huge Alan Moore fan. I just think he's spectacular, like just one of the most important writers in comics besides Stan, you know. So that's really great. I'll take a look for it. I even read his book recently, the one that
I haven't read that. How did you like it?
So the thing about Alan that I like about Alan, that's a frustrating aspect for other people to read it, is that I would read a paragraph, not know what I just read, and then the next 5 paragraphs would sort of, by the end of the next 5 paragraphs, I'd go, oh, that's what I just read. You know? So like the way that he writes text or prose is pretty fascinating. It's a very purple prose. It's very flowery. It's his thesaurus is clearly seated next to his desk, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's some people there's one particular story in there that's a comic centric kind of thing, and I gather that a lot of people were, especially the people he was trying to make fun of, got a little bit bent out of shape about it. But I can understand why. Some of it's kind of mean spirited, but I just thought it was a very clever sort of way to handle some of it, and laughed out loud at a whole bunch of things. But yeah, it's I liked it. I like I said, I'm a big Alan fan, so
I was his first editor in America.
Oh, wow.
Most people in America didn't know who he was at that moment in time. I was tight with the folks at 2000 AD, and they were sending it to me. So I was a big fan of his. But being the only guy on this side of the ocean, I was not prepared when I got in the mail. It was like a 8-page story.
Mhm.
Backup for Flag,
And
right?
the manuscript was the Manhattan phone directory. Remember phone books, folks? Is
Sure.
about 23,000 pages, and I'm going like, holy crap, this is like 8 pages. I thought I would edit this and get on with the rest of my work. It took me the rest of the day to read the damn thing. It was one of the best days of my life. I really enjoyed reading it. Plus the next half dozen stories that he did in that series. It was a backup in American Flag, and it was great. But I think his best writing is not the stuff that got printed.
Yeah.
I think it's the manuscripts.
That's probably right. Yeah, absolutely.
Now I hear that DC is talking about publishing the Watchmen manuscripts. I guess because they haven't pissed off Alan lately.
So when I was in Los Angeles at the LA Comic-Con, I ran into Barbara Randall.
Yeah.
Oh,
and she
I love
edited Watchmen, or was editing on it at least.
Yes.
And she was dishing like Barbara. Listen, I'm gonna tell you, Barbara's fantastic. She came over. I happened to be with Shelley Bond at the time, and she came over to Shelley, and it's the first time they had met, I think, because by the time Shelley got to DC, Barbara had gone to Dark Horse, and or they just missed or whatever. But this first time they met, and it was quite a conversation. And then Barbara left, and Shelley and I looked at each other, and Shelley's response to me was, "Wow, what a hoot." It was fantastic. But what she was saying was one of her things was in editing Alan on Watchmen was he's using British, you're saying these people are American and your turns of phrase are British. You need to change those, so it sounds like it's an American person talking.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, sure. That would be the only criticism I would be able to drag into an Alan Moore.
Yeah, I mean, you got to translate it into American.
Yeah.
And I understand why
can't have the comedian smoking a fag.
I understand why some Brits have a problem with that, because they think of it as their language, and English is their language. They're right. American is our language, and it has all of the beauty and all of the horrors of everything else that has the American adjective put on it.
I guess that's true. Although I'm sure the Norman conquest wasn't that part of the reason that the English language changed into whatever the English language is? They've been conquered so many times that the language itself is such a bastardization. It'd be funny to even have a conversation with somebody who has a purist concept of the English language.
Well, I'm wondering, I love language. I love words. I love how they evolve over time, long time, short time. But I think now with instant communication, global instant communication, I think we may see less of that. I think that language is some language is going to just change jingoistically immediately all the time. And others that would have changed will not, because there isn't the need. sooner or later, we, probably not me, are all going to wind up speaking Esperanto after all.
The only movies we'll be able to understand are the old William
Oh my
Shatner Esperanto.
William Shatner. I know.
It's his birthday yesterday.
Yes, it was. He's about 1,000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was funny.
So-
It was what was hilarious was like last week there was something where he had said he's not going to live very long, and then it became huge clickbait, headlines. He's like, I didn't mean it that way. I mean, like I'm 90 something. I'm not going to live for, the end is coming, but I'm not dying now, But
well,
There
when
was
you're
a
in your
comedian-
90s,
I'm sorry.
go ahead. No. I was just going to say, when you're in your 90s, I noticed with my grandmother that it has the same sort of math as when you're a toddler. So little kids are like 18 months old, 19 months old. And when you're like 97 years old, you're like 97 and a half.
yeah,
98 and a half. You know what I mean? Like, that becomes very important again. So
that's interesting.
There was a comedian named Professor Irwin Corey. Brilliant comedian, 1950s, 60s, did a lot of acting too, but mostly he played this character, the world's foremost authority, never said about what. And he was just hilarious. And he lived to 102.
yeah.
And he was working at least until he was 99. I saw some footage of his 100th birthday party. And he was funny as hell, but it's a party, so maybe he was working, maybe he wasn't. I don't know if that counts. But don't blow off people who are 20 years older than me, because a few of them are worth the trip.
Oh, absolutely. Well, my grandmother, like I said, she lived to 102, and she was taking college courses all through her 90s. So
that's great. That's great.
Active, and that's the kind of my other grandmother, my mother's mother, was in a band all the way into her 80s, and like the year or two before she passed away, she played the Garden State Arts Center,
that's
so
crazy.
And the last time I talked to her, she said, well, we have a stripper in the band, but don't worry, she's in her 50s, which I just didn't know what it would take. I was like, okay, because she was in her 80s, I think. So she was like thinking that the stripper was, I don't know. I didn't really know what to do with that one.
Was that good or bad? Like, was that like,
she's old? Yeah, because she was like, don't worry, she's in her 50s. And I was like, oh, okay. But
I've seen a stripper who was in her 50s.
Yeah,
sure. And I had to go backstage. I was taken backstage afterwards. And all I could ask her was like, are you really like 54? And she says, yeah, you better believe it. I was in my like 20s at the time or something. It was frightening yet wonderful, because it taught me at an early age not to indulge in those types of stereotypes.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, especially age, I look younger than I am. So I run across this a lot, is that people assume that you're something just the way that you look,
Right.
Well, I'm older. I'm younger than I look. So we're the opposite.
It's there's a flip side of everything. So it's just funny. Like, you can talk to somebody and they assume that you're something, but yeah.
And speaking of that, I want to kind of a couple of things before we have to close out here. I want to let everybody know that on Tuesday night, speaking of somebody who has time, I think that my guest on Tuesday night for our last Women in History Month anniversary celebration is going to be Trina Robbins and Mindy Newell. And Trina has said that she's 84, so she's got 16 more years, and she's going to die at her keyboard, is what I think she said. So she's not stopping. She's got 16 more years to go, so don't stop anything. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's Tuesday night at 8 Eastern. And Mike and I are going to be at C2E2 next weekend, and we're going to have the first of a season-long roadshow of First Comics 40th anniversary, and I'm springing this on Mike Scott. So you're our first guinea pig. So
Right.
for as we go through this year, as we have guests on and they are able to get to this time in the show, we're gonna have the first comic section of the show. So our guest, which is you need to come up with or tell us something that you remember about First Comics. Or
Good
what was one of the comics that you remember about from that time?
Well, was First the publisher that did American Flag?
Yep,
they did.
That? Okay, then
Yep.
I remember.
They did Sable. They did Grimjack.
Yeah, I remember those comics being in the comic shop in Morristown. They were really interesting. There was a whole bunch of what I considered to be independent comics. I never really had a way of putting my finger on it, but Heroes World especially, they had a wide variety of comics that were just fascinating to me, and most of them broke whatever rules I had in my head about what comics could be. Because up until then, you read the Richie Riches, and then you read like Spider-Man, and then you read, it was sort of stopped at Marvel, like, and DC, like, that was sort of expected to be reading it in your teens, but the stuff from First was this first stuff that I ran across where I felt like it was more for like the next level of reading. Do you know what I mean? Like, the stuff that you would be reading in your late teens or early 20s or things like that, like, because it was certainly a lot of material that I just considered to be like just more adult. I don't know really how to describe that. I mean, I ran across these things when I was 13 or 14, so.
Well, that's the right age. That's the right age.
Yeah.
That was done with malice of forethought. And when I was, I'd do store appearances or conventions or what have you, and somebody would bring me a bunch of like American Flag issues to sign, and they'd be like 11. And I'd have to figure out like, do I really want to do that? Finally, when Chaykin did Blackhawk over at DC, and I was the editor of that Prestige Formats series, and Howard and I had a wonderful time working on that together. It was probably too self-indulgent. We had too much of a good time. We had some of the sex stuff in Blackhawk that people think we put into American Flag, but didn't. We went right up to the line. Well, in Blackhawk, what the hell? We crossed the line. And then this like 9-year-old comes up to me to sign all 3 issues of this Prestige Format series. And I go like, his father's right behind him. And I go, you sure you want me to do this? I mean, and the father goes nuts. He says, yes, my son wants it. You'll sign it. I said, oh, fine, sure. I just wanted you to sign off on my signing on. That's all. That was great. We corrupted another mind. Yes.
Yeah, there's and there's a Blackhawks Easter egg. There's a Blackhawks Easter egg in the giant kaiju. That's what I was referencing, Scott.
There are, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Even doing the giant kaiju, like, to me, it's an adult comic. Like, I hope that I've gotten across that, do not pick this up if you're below 18, So, but
please do not. But
it's that kind
if
of
you
thing,
are over 18, you should go get it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you're over 18, please buy 3. But
but today's 14-year-olds have the smarts and the sensibilities of last generation's 18-year-olds. So I don't really have a problem with younger people reading it. Generally speaking, if they're reading something that's inappropriate, they either won't get it or won't care enough. Either way, they will survive.
Yeah,
so I can't do that with Superman or with Spider-Man. I got that. That's fine.
Yeah, there's a what I've noticed when I noticed my child like taking in stuff that I thought was a little older, material, what I notice is that the things that you're worried about just go over their head. They don't really,
Right.
it doesn't register with them. And then the stuff that does register with them is always going to be something slightly different anyway. And you can't help that because the culture is, like you say, the culture is just going to seep in and change their minds about who they are and what they want to do and what the world is like without you, regardless of what you wanted to have in there. But
Hey, life is a smorgasbord.
yeah,
If you don't pluck out interesting stuff as a kid, you'll never try it as an adult. Go for it.
yeah, that's a great way to put it. And certainly with Kokshu, like that spirit of having a more adult comic book that I saw in all the independents and in First Comics, that kind of stuff is what we're shooting for in that book. So I hope that people understand where we're coming from, So
Thanks for indulging me there, Scott.
yeah, of course, absolutely. I think that's really cool.
I think it's important. We're doing this like it, and like I said, we're doing it at C2E2. It's the 40th anniversary of First Comics.
Wow.
And I'm sure I'm going to embarrass Mike on Sunday, on that Sunday the 2nd. But it changed the game. What he did there. Is that the new one?
That's the new one.
Oh,
that cat is so cute.
I know, she's adorable. First Comics changed the game. Their legacy is in so many comics that we see today. So much of the industry is there. And like you were saying, like there was a time like I don't know how you felt about this, Scott, but like when the Image thing happened, like I have a lot of friends who were 5 to 7 years younger than me who that was perfect for them because they were 13 and 14.
Yeah.
But for me, it didn't hit. It just, it didn't hit me the way that it hit them. But Vertigo did.
Yeah.
What was going on with Vertigo was that something, that's the next level. That's where I'm maturing and my reading material is maturing. And so I think that's what is part of the legacy of what was coming out of First at the time.
Yeah.
Did you read Amy Cho's graphic novels, vampire novel for
I haven't read
Dark
it yet.
Horse? It's Berger Books, so Karen Berger is the editor, and it's very much a Karen Berger feel to it, except it doesn't have a brown cover, and it's brilliant. It's just brilliant. I'm sorry. I seem to have gotten both of you guys on the brown cover line.
Thanks for joining us, Scott.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm being goofy.
No, I really want to read that book. I haven't gotten a chance to yet. I have to find Dark Horse and yell at them because they don't give me stuff that I want.
I can send you a PDF, but you'd have to promise to give Amy a couple of bucks.
Well, I do. I always do.
All right.
She's going to be at WonderCon this weekend. Actually, Amy at WonderCon on Saturday is interviewing Trina Robbins.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So,
Trina did a book 30 years ago, maybe longer, about a hero of mine, a woman named Bessie Coleman, who was a black aviatrix. And her story is brilliant and very much worth telling, but she just wound up on the back of a quarter. They're doing this women's quarter history.
There was a comic about her about 2 months ago.
Yeah, she's finally catching on. I knew about her because an obscure street was named after her, and I checked it out. I was just curious, and that was decades ago. So ask Trina for me how she likes one of her graphic novels turned into a quarter. It turned into a quarter.
I will definitely add that to the list of questions I have for Trina Hopkins.
Bob, are you going to be at WonderCon or no?
I'm
Oh,
not.
you're gonna, no,
I'm not.
C2E.
Yeah, well, we're going to be at C2E2 next week. I wish, it looks like it's going to be a great show. I hope you have a great time there. I know you're going to be there, right? It's the first time in a while.
Yeah, I'll be at WonderCon. It's the first time I've been there in like 5 years. So, and then I'm going to do MegaCon, which is the first time I've ever gone to that.
Right, that's the following weekend, right?
Yeah, that's the same. That's the following weekend. So,
which is
this weekend is WonderCon. Next weekend is MegaCon, and I'll be curious to see what MegaCon's like. I've never been to it, so I'm kind of just wondering. I haven't done that many conventions on the East Coast. So I usually hit pretty much everything up and down the West Coast. But
Bob and I met at Baltimore, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a wonderful show.
Okay. I went to Baltimore once, but I only did it because I did some stuff for the Hero Initiative. They asked me to come along. So I was at the Hero booth. And what happened the entire weekend was people would walk past the Hero booth and go, "I didn't know you were here." And then I would go, yes, I am here. So I'll have to go to Baltimore and actually, put my name on the fact that I'm going to be there.
Well,
yeah, put it on your T-shirt.
I'll put in a word for you. But yes, we met in Baltimore. I have never been to MegaCon. It's one of the shows that I want to go to. So I have good friends who are very, very involved in it, and I know a lot of people who go there and love it.
That's awesome.
So I hope you have a great time. Say hi to Constance and Paul for me when you get there.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah. So, well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for being had.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I know that we kind of broke the internet there for a little bit, but
we worked it out.
It wasn't too much trouble. So, but yeah, thanks for having me. And everybody should pick up the big giant monster book that they'll immediately regret having read. But I think that everyone will have a fun time reading it.
Well, yeah, I hope so too. And we both found it to be something that I'm looking forward to issue 2.
Oh, good, great. Yes,
so I mean that you succeeded. Like that's what I was. While you were gone, we kind of talked about that you made it to the point that I want to see what happens next.
Oh, good.
That's the job.
That's the job.
You got a 3-part story. You got to bring them back for the second.
Yep. And
then they'll read the third because what the hell, they read the first 2.
That's right.
Do you know how many times I go into the comic shop and I'm like, I really don't like it. I might just give me the 4th issue already. I don't want to get it, but I might as well. I feel bad.
Okay.
Well, good. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And
thank you very much, Scott.
It's a pleasure meeting you, Mike. Wonderful, and it's great to see you again, Bob. So
you too.
Hopefully, we will cross paths again.
Hopefully, we will. Again,
it's been wonderful talking with you, Scott. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Absolutely.
And also, don't forget
to pick up his. Sign-off kind of thing that happens, or do you?
We have to figure that out. We're getting close. We're getting close to figuring that out. I got one of the minions or empresses of Pop Culture Squad has been bugging me about our intro and outro stuff, and I have to spend some time working on that. But we don't. So I'm gonna let you go, and we will catch up soon. We do not yet have a guest set up for 2 weeks, but we're probably gonna have, because of next week being traveling and the following week being traveling as well, we may take a 3-week break and come back right after that and go back to
no
Tuesday.
When you're in Chicago, you and Mark and I and probably the other Unshavens will interview an Italian beef sandwich.
Well, we'll definitely There will be a lot of recording in Chicago. I'll tell you that. So maybe we'll get some enough content to just pop something up without us while we're traveling. So
There you go.
But thanks, Scott, for doing this, and good luck
Thank you.
on the book, and give your hands a rest from the 700 characters. And,
no, I'm busy on the next thing. So yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you got to work for that
Like a
1,000.
Yeah, I got it like a shark. Yeah, I have ideas about the 1,000. So, the editor Spider-Man, give me a call.
All right.
All right.
All right. Michael,
That was great.
have a good
I had
night.
a good time. You
You
too,
did
Bob.
too. I did too.
All you folks out there in viewer land, thanks for sticking by.
Yep.